Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's yet another episode with Max Adventure and SAP Cloud Platform. It's Tuesday morning. Sorry, we had some problems with our streaming software. As you can already see, I have a special guest today, Dries van Vaerenbergh. Good morning. Thanks for joining. I hope you're doing fine, even though we had some issues with the live streaming software.
Good morning, Max, and thanks for having me. I'm glad we solved the issues, so we're ready to start for today.
Well, I already regretted that I've invited you because, that's the most complicated name I could have chosen. I hope I have it right everywhere.
No problem at all, but it's indeed it couldn't be longer.
So, before we're gonna dive into the actual topic, I've read some blog posts about some stuff you've done with enterprise messaging, with WebSockets, with webhooks, etc. They are awesome. They definitely deserve more attention, and that's why I've invited you. That we see that stuff live, that we can discuss a couple of things. But before, let us know a couple of things about you. You live in, well, that was my mistake yesterday. I thought you were living in the Netherlands, but it's in Belgium, right?
Indeed.
Okay. How old are you? What are you doing?
Sorry?
How old are you? What are you doing?
Yes, so I'm Dries van Vaerenbergh with the good long name. And I'm 25 years old, so I'm still the young guy in the SAP world discovering all these amazing services.
I used to be the one young guy, but
How old are you, Max?
today, 28.
28. Okay, then I think I will be one of the youngest from now on. And indeed, it's so I'm 25, and I actually work as an SAP consultant for Flexo Digital. And I started my career there as a developer, and actually I did my internship there, and that way I grew into the company, and I started as an SAP development consultant. And actually, I have a lot of thanks to say to Walter Lemaire, because actually he was and he is a good friend of mine, and he brought me to the SAP world. He brought me to the blogging parts, and he showed me around. And I'm really grateful for that, and also for the company itself, because they give amazing chances, which I really appreciate.
Nice, awesome, thanks. So since we didn't have any time to discuss how we're gonna do that, and that's actually all live, it's up to you how we're gonna handle it. So do you want to go over what you've done? Do you want to go over the concepts? Whatever you want to do in the beginning, feel free to do that. I will dive in or chime in and have questions, dumb questions and hard questions to you.
Right. I think it's maybe a good idea to have a small and little look at what enterprise messaging actually is, and what kind of concepts it brings along with it. Because if we start immediately with a demo, some things could not be really self-explaining, while they're actually not that difficult. But the SAP help documentation can help us a lot with a small, brief introduction to it. So I think if we do this and we jump into a demo afterwards,
Nice.
regarding to the blog series, I think that we can have a clear live stream.
All right. So I think I'm gonna share your screen. That you're the stage is yours. Really love that phrase, center live, and hopefully we can see a screen now. Perfect. So enterprise messaging is a service on SAP Cloud Platform, right?
Indeed.
What is it used for? Why should somebody out there use it?
Actually, the first thing about that is what should it not used for? And by looking at that, because it's something that can really be abused, I think, because people will start to send whatever they want with it, to start to use it as a socket to have some real-time data and notifications or events in an application. And actually, that's cool and nice for demos, but you will not want to use that in your real production environment, because what you actually want to do with this is you want to connect your systems with enterprise messaging, so they can start to create events and messages, so that all those messages can be queued and later on be displayed in your application. For example, an S4 system or some IoT Industry 4.0 scenarios where you have, let's say, some industrial building blocks and with machines that are creating messages. Okay, of course, you might want to think about SAP Leonardo IoT there, but it's like really, you will know for yourself when you're like abusing it. You will know, like you'll be like, oh yeah, I'm connecting, like, and then you will be like, nah, this is not good. You will know.
Okay. But in general, it's a messaging bus like whatever you have in the non-SAP world. Sometimes it's good to demystify the SAP wordings because enterprise messaging doesn't really mean a lot to me in the beginning. If you think about a non-SAP world, it's like an active MQ, like a sophisticated active MQ or whatever messaging bus you have for free out there, or a Rabbit MQ, but a little more sophisticated with an enterprise focus on connecting SAP systems and SAP Cloud Platform, I would say.
Totally agree. Like, couldn't say better. No, it's, indeed, like you will know when you're like using it, and it's actually really the messaging queue for the enterprise, which is allowing you to publish business events and decouple communication. Like the documentation here is actually telling us, because if we look at here, we will see that you will actually create actually a service that connects all your systems together to log all those events. And actually with this, we could have actually a look at those concepts, because there are like multiple ways that you can set up this enterprise messaging service. And it's something that you really want to think about before you start, because what I did back then when I started with the service, of course, it was trial and error in the beginning, and it was just connecting the stuff. And if we have a look at the concepts, then you will see that there are like different concepts. And the first one is a queue. And a queue in enterprise messaging is actually, you can have a look at it as a place where messages are stored. The queue holds the messages that have been sent by any machine or system, and they stay there. They are retained there, those messages, and they can be consumed by an application whenever they connect or whenever they need actually some information about the message. And one thing about this, if the message is consumed, it's gone. It's no longer in the queue, so it cannot be reused by anything else anymore. And that, of course, brings us to the second topic, which is topics. And yeah, well, a little joke there. And in here, we actually have the topics. And the different thing with the topics is that you can actually connect multiple clients or say applications to one topic that can all consume the message. But then actually the disadvantage would be that if you send a message to a topic and the client is not online, it will no longer receive the message. Also afterward, it is not there anymore because the messages are not retained, they are gone. So that's like the difference with the queue. It's like if you have to choose, then you will lose in this case, because it will never actually fully help you with your need. And that's why they have also the queue subscriptions. And these queue subscriptions are actually a combination of both, like the best of both worlds. And with this, we actually have a sending application or a system, and it can send and subscribe to topics. And these topics, they can be connected to a queue. So if the device would not be online, the messages are still retained in the queue and can be consumed afterwards. And this is actually, I think, a best practice and the way to go if you want to set up such applications. Because with a queue, if we have a look back, you would need a queue for every application. With a topic, you have the chance to lose your messages. And with queue subscriptions, you actually are like totally connected and you have actually your backup with your queue. And,
and I think the argument of decoupling systems is pretty important when it comes to queue subscriptions, because the sender doesn't really have to take care or what happens with the message. The system could be down or whatever. The sender system sends the message and doesn't really take care of what happens after the message was sent.
Just a shout out to his topic, and he doesn't care anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's for the beginning really important to know these differences in how to connect queues to topics, how to subscribe to topics, etc.
Because small small thing about it. When I was practicing and playing around with the services, I
Yeah.
had actually two consuming applications because I created one like in the blog series with a webhook and one consuming as a WebSocket. And one application was already consuming the messages in the queue. And I was like, why are there no messages in my application? Like, what am I doing wrong? Like, the other application was consuming them. You can really make a fool of yourself with it if you don't have a look at the small concepts information here.
But I think that's a good bridge. I'm not sure if I skip anything here, but as I said in the beginning, you had like issues with all sort of things. How did you get started? Like, is there, and that's a leading question, is there a trial for that? Can you use it in a trial environment, or is there a need to buy anything?
Indeed, it's available enterprise messaging in the SAP Cloud Platform and in the Cloud Foundry environment, also in the trial environment.
Okay.
And how I actually started to play around with it was because I was playing a little bit with Node.js and an Express server to set up some GET and POST requests. And I always been fascinated by WebSockets because at school I started with Firebase and everything was like real time. I was like, I love this. What is this? What is the magic behind this part? And so I was always really fascinated by it. And then I wanted to start with it, and I saw like enterprise messaging, and I was like, okay, please don't start abusing it for real-time applications. That's not what it's used for. You create your own WebSockets. It's not about enterprise messaging. But then I saw it, and I saw something like a webhook, and because there I was playing around with this Node.js and a post request, and I saw like actually a post request on this Express server. I have the URL of my application, and I saw a webhook, and I was like, I can place this URL in here. And what a webhook will actually do is like server to server communication, and it will just actually create a post request on the URL you provide in enterprise messaging. So what it does, it will just post a request. And with that, I actually started. I was like, hey, I can get my messages from enterprise messaging in my Node.js application. Now I have to endure and I have to start with these WebSockets. This is the time. And just by playing around and following some actually nice trials and tutorials online on the SAP developers of SAP. There are really good tutorials about it. And also, if you really want to get started and have some more information on videos, I would really recommend the HANA Academy YouTube videos because they really taught me a lot. Also, the other blog post about community members really helped me to start with enterprise messaging. So there's a lot of information out there. So it's really a good place to get started. And also it's available on the trial environment in the cloud platform.
Perfect. All right. I just put the link from the SAP HANA Academy in the chat so that people know what we are talking about. Philip Mugglestone did a really good job in recording, I guess, around 10 videos, how to set up enterprise messaging, how to use it. It's pretty awesome to get started. So, how did we go on? Do you want to show us something, or should we have a further look on the concepts, or is it?
I think we can actually dive right into the application. We can maybe a little word about the application itself, what I created in the blog series, and what we will have a look on in this live stream is actually a multi-target application, which is using an app router to connect actually the UI5 application that we will be building to our Node.js module. And actually, the magic actually kind of happens in the Node.js module itself, because there we actually connect to enterprise messaging. If enterprise messaging will receive a message, then we will actually place this message into our WebSockets where we connect to via our UI5 application. So our UI5 application will be notified by its own WebSocket with a message that is coming from enterprise messaging. So this kind of way we are building an application. And to point out, in this live stream, we will create a chat application where actually enterprise messaging should not be used for. Use it for
disclaimer.
Be careful. I never said that you should use it for a chat app, so keep that in mind. So then maybe we'll have a look at the enterprise messaging service itself. So how you get started with it? It's also in the SAP HANA Academy videos. They explain really well to get started to activate the service on cloud platform. And once you created the instance and you created your service keys inside your instance to get started with it, you actually can access, if you have the correct authorizations, of course, with the secure tool, but they really explain well in the videos. Then you can get started with your enterprise messaging. And here I'm actually in the dashboard of the service. And as you can see here, we have our queues. I created one queue here, and it's just easy called Q1, and it has 0 messages. Now,
Okay.
I will send actually a request to it. And what I can say here is I can say,
Just a second, please. We had to talk about the concepts before. That's like
yeah,
only the queue, like this first architecture diagram in the concepts. That's not a topic. It's not a queue subscription. That's just a plain queue.
yeah,
Whenever the message is consumed, it's gone.
indeed. Totally
Okay.
correct. Yeah. So with this, we're actually sending a message to the queue. Voilà. And here I have actually the URL. And as you can see here, I have my Q1 and I go to the messages. So what I will do here, I will post this message to this queue and it will be visible in the queue itself. And of course, this is working with bearer tokens, which you can get via a post request on your token URL. And that token URL can be found in your enterprise messaging service on cloud platform. And
So it's queue, right?
indeed. And
Yeah.
if we send this message, okay, we get a no content because, like we said before, it doesn't care. It just sends it and basta.
Fire and forget.
Yeah. And if I refresh here, we should see a message, but we don't. You see, so start searching, then you're like, what's happening? Because we already have our actually applications connected to it. It's already consuming them, so they're gone. But if we would turn those applications down, we could see that numbers of messages will increase and actually the messages itself are stored inside this queue.
Okay.
Now, like we saw in the concepts of enterprise messaging, we also have those queue subscriptions. And in here, you can see you can create actually a topic, your subscribed topic, and this is working together with this queue, just like we saw in the concept. It's connected, it's a combination, and this way it can work fine, and it will store the messages even though they were first sent to a topic, and they will retain inside your queue. Now, why would you use actually a topic? Just like we said before, because sometimes you don't want to use a queue for every single application that consumes it. And second of all, for example, if I remember correctly, let's have a look back. Here, I think that actually an S4HANA system can only send messages
Yeah. As
to.
for HANA systems are only able to publish events to a topic. So, for example, if you wanna, well, the most prominent example is a business partner. If a S4 system wants to publish a change business partner, it publishes to a topic because probably multiple applications are interested in consuming the event and not only a single one.
Yes. So perfect description there, explanation, because this is just what you want to achieve with this kind of setup. Because what we are doing, we are sending just message to the queue straightforward, and then it will be consumed by the application. And what I was talking about before are the webhook, webhook subscriptions. And in here, what you could do is when you create it inside here, you just can say like create one, and then of course you have to place a subscription name. You select your queue, your quality of service. Your quality of service, actually, what is this? They also explain it in the HANA Academy videos. It's some kind of check that you can see, some like kind of like acknowledgement. Because if you send it, you don't have to care. But I believe so that if you put it on one, yep, indeed, then you still need an acknowledgement of sending, that it happened correctly, that you can say, okay, this was the right way, it happened correctly. And with this, you can actually have some kind of confirmation. And this one is the one that brought me relief when I started. I saw, hey, I can put a URL. Let's put my URL of my Express application running in Node.js. And you do want to exempt the handshake. And to be honest, in the beginning, I was like, what is this? I didn't know anything about it. And I would start searching and I was like, is it safe to put it on? I believe so. I believe because with this, I saw somewhere on a tutorial and they said that you should put it on. I think it was something on Teget that I saw a demo stuff. And there they said like you have to turn this on because you don't want your system to do the handshake because otherwise I think you should implement it inside your other application, but I'm not sure about that. So
Okay. But just slow down for a second, because this is something I haven't done, and probably that's mind-blowing for somebody as well. So there are two different ways to consume messages, right? Either one is like using a client in Node.js, as you have done it,
yep.
I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could simply provide a URL where enterprise messaging takes care. Whenever there's a message in the queue, please call it URL. What, for example, is super useful for serverless functions or whatever.
Yeah, indeed. So then you don't have to worry about your own like Node.js application with the WebSocket stuff because that's then the other part. And with this, you can actually just provide a URL where you want enterprise messaging to perform the post call on with the message, and then you will receive it whatever you put on. And of course, we have the authentication. And actually, since on Cloud Platform and Cloud Foundry environment, we like to secure our applications with the OAuth configurations. You could actually use it here, and you could start to fill in the token URL point, the secrets. And with this, then you actually create it. But do know that if you set it up for a queue or a queue subscription in here, and you also have it running somewhere in your queues inside with another consuming application, you're gonna be lost like me back then. So that's the hard part. Really,
all right.
Yeah. With this, it's the full setup in enterprise messaging itself. Just subscribe to the service itself. Make sure you have the correct roles. Dive into it. Create your queues, your topics, or your queue subscriptions, or your webhooks, and you're good to go with the service itself.
Okay, I think it's time for some code.
Yes.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm super curious about the code.
And let me share it. All right. So I'm here in the business.
Do you want to do me a favor and bump up the font size slightly?
Sure. Better?
Yep, that's better. Perfect.
So what is this all about? So let me first close this one. Here I have my project, and I actually generated it with Easy UI5 generator, which is a lovely generator to help you get started with your setup. And in here, actually, have three main components. I have my app router, I have my node module, which is actually creating the connection between enterprise messaging and our own WebSocket. And third of all, we have the web app itself. And of course, this was called the UI5 programming configuration application. And actually, there are some steps to take, but they're not that huge if you found it out once, because actually it's quite explained in a good way. But before we start in here with the code itself, I'd like to say that if you're developing this in Application Studio, you might want to consider some adjustment here and there based on the forwarding of your request to the app router, because you can create it here, you can use it, but with the app router, sometimes you can have some difficulties and you will have to use the real URL that is provided by the Application Studio. Because sometimes it can be a little hard, and sometimes your actually WebSocket can turn down, because I think, I'm not quite sure, like I said, Max, I think Application Studio is also sending messages to your WebSocket in some kind of way, which makes it crash. I'm not kind of sure about it, but
yeah, I didn't have the time yet to look into it, but I think there's some things with authentication, because the Business Application Studio secures itself with OAuth, and I'm not really sure how that works together. But yeah, that's definitely like a little bumpy in the beginning with the Business Application Studio.
Because I also saw with the XSUAA service, there I got it to work, but here I don't use authentication yet. So, but maybe indeed it will help to get along with it. So if you don't want to use the Application Studio because you're a little, I would say, afraid to use the Application Studio because you don't want to make it more difficult than it is in the beginning, you can also use just Visual Code and start there, because there you will not have the troubles with the forwarding and the website URLs. Okay,
Okay.
now time for the code. Maybe I should start with the Node module itself.
Okay, that's the backend application connecting to enterprise messaging, right?
So in here, actually, what did I do when I created my project with EasyUI5 generator? I actually just created another directory called WebSocket, Enterprise Messaging WebSocket. I initialized it with npm, and I created my index.js file. And actually, it's just here. Let me close this so you can see a little more. What is actually happening? We actually use the SAP XSenv to actually read out our environment variables. And what we want to do is we want to create actually a WebSocket ourselves. And this we will run on port 8080 or on the process environment port. And why do we want to actually create a second WebSocket server? Because the enterprise messaging is already a WebSocket on itself that will actually provide a URL that you could use. And the reason for that is, I think, if you use this in a Node module and you connect your UI5 application via your app router, you actually some kind of secure it, because you stay away of calling the enterprise messaging service with token endpoints and tokens itself in the front end. So no one has to see that code, no one can exit it. And that way, I think you make it a little more secure. Plus, if you would, yep, go ahead, next.
Yeah, just 1 second. Because in the beginning, when I started with Cloud Foundry, I always thought where are those? What is this XSenv module? Where are the environment variables coming from? And that's simply just the service binding in either the MTA file or the manifest file while you deploy.
Yep, indeed. And so what you actually are doing here, you're actually just searching for your enterprise messaging service. And once you have your service, you want to read out your service keys and your service key information, because you want to connect to it. And with this, as you can see here, you are also using that information to connect later on, because this is actually just an object with all the information you need to connect to the enterprise messaging service. And later on, you use that to connect itself to the enterprise messaging service itself. Now, about this, if you would put this in the front end and people start to dive into it and dig into it, they can search for your tokens. And that is maybe something you want to keep away from them, because you don't want to start play around with your tokens, because they can start to consume and your whole scenario, is going to be broken. And with taking it away from the front end is one thing. And if you would use it inside the front end itself, it would be one single application consuming those messages, and they will use it and it's gone. So if you want to connect another client also to see the messages, they will be gone because someone else already consumed them. So that's why creating your own web socket server inside Node.js, you can actually get the message and you can spread it and broadcast it to all your connected clients to your WebSocket. And that's I think, an advantage of using an extra Node module inside here.
Okay.
All right. Then if we go a little deeper, we will see that here we are actually connecting to the AMQP, which is the connection to enterprise messaging in this case. So this would not be needed if we would be using the webhooks, because if we use a Node module as an Express application, we can receive the message and we can do with it whatever we want, because it's just a post endpoint that is available and we get the message in there. So we don't have to use this then. All right, with this we set up our connection to enterprise messaging. And then we have actually our 4 states, let's say connected, assert, error, and disconnected. And it's interesting and good to know that if you connect to this, you are not connecting with your UI5 application. That's not your consuming client. It's the AMQP enterprise messaging connection that you're creating there. And with this, you can actually choose, you can connect outside your own enterprise message. You can connect outside your WebSocket, because otherwise you would always connect every time someone else creates a connection to your own WebSocket. It's maybe something you want to, it depends, because maybe sometimes it can lose the connection after a while, and then you want to, because the token can expire, then you want to reconnect. It's a decision you have to make, and you can set it up the way you want, but it's something that you should think about.
Yeah, it's definitely an option. Yeah.
Yep. And then in here we have our stream, and it's actually a connection on data. And this means if data is coming in, if a message is received by the enterprise messaging service, we're gonna actually parse this payload. We're gonna read it out as UTF-8, and we're gonna actually then broadcast to all the connected clients. And those are actually UI5 applications. For example, Max, if you open the UI5 application and I open one, then we are both connected, and we are inside this WebSocket server, this clients inside here. And with this, actually every client like you and me, we will receive the message coming from the enterprise messaging service.
So and that's like the 10 lines where all the magic happens. So like the 50 lines above is importing modules, connecting to enterprise messaging. But whenever somebody puts a message on the queue, this 10 line of codes are executed.
It's actually kind of cool. I don't want to think about it, what you would have to do otherwise. Damn.
Yeah.
All right. And with this, actually, like we said, indeed, the WebSocket server, which we created upstairs here, the WebSocket server, it's actually one that we are using here to send the message to all the connected clients. And with this, you actually just created your enterprise messaging WebSocket node module, and this is then ready to use if you would just start it. So.
One last question before we go on. The WebSocket module or the WebSocket server you create here is nothing specific to SAP. That's just another Node.js module, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a Node.js expert, but that's what I've seen. Right?
Totally correct. It's just you also could use. I think it was socket.io. It also exists. They also have their Node modules for it.
Yeah, there are a couple of them.
They're also really handy, I believe.
Okay, perfect.
All right. So with this, we actually have our WebSocket. And then the next thing that we want to do is we actually want to connect the UI5 application to it. And for this, what we would want to do is we want to go and route it via the app router itself. And because we want to use this, we actually have here our xs-app.json file. And this allows us to create a route that our UI5 application can use. So for example, if you would say in our UI5 application /node.ws, then we would say, okay, connect. The app router will say, okay, this is meant for this path. We want to target it, and we need to know where it is. And with this, we have actually our destination, the enterprise message WebSocket API, and then we can connect to it. But not to forget the magic, because if we forget this, it will not work, because then we will not be able to connect, and then I will get more gray hair. We have this part here. It's also explained in the SAP help documentation of Cloud Platform getting started, I believe, with WebSockets in Cloud Foundry. And this is really necessary because indeed it's like self-explaining. You enable the WebSockets via the app router.
Yeah.
So this is the key to make it work, because without it, you're lost. And what we have actually next, if we have a look at our Mtl Remote File, that's actually the file that we need to build all the modules inside your project and to deploy it and to create all the modules itself. If we have a look, we see, of course, our app router and everything that is using in there, everything that requires repo runtime destinations, but it also requires this enterprise message WebSocket API. And as we can see, it's really familiar, and that is because it's totally the same. It's the destination we want to use if the route is matched of our xs-app.json app router. And
yeah, that was really hard for me to understand in the beginning. Where does this destinations in the app router are coming from? I mean, the app router itself is super powerful, and in the beginning I thought like, well, why do we need the app router at all? But the more I think about it, the more useful I find it.
Totally agree. In the beginning I was lost. I was like, what is this app router? What is this? Can you just deploy, please? As you can see, indeed, we're using it in our xs-app.json, and we need to require it for our final WebSocket app, our app router in short. And to be able to use it, we have to require it. And then the next question is, okay, but where is it coming from? okay, we have to forward our authentication token to it, to the URL, but where is this one coming from? And actually, if we go a little more to the bottom, we see our node module. And this is exactly the one that we created here. And in here, we actually have our WebSocket itself, and it provides something. And what is it providing? The WebSocket API. Okay, makes sense. WebSocket API is provided by our by our WebSocket itself, which makes sense, and we need to use it here in our app router, so we require it. Same logic applies for the requires.em. What is this? Requires.em. Okay, let me check. I require enterprise messaging because I'm using it inside my node module. All right. And okay, where is this guy coming from again? When we go to resources, we see that we have a resources called enterprise messaging, and it's a service with a plan of enterprise messaging dev. And just to make it understandable and clear, it's easy. And I think it's also, if I'm not mistaken, necessary to place here the name of your instance itself.
Yeah. The name of the resource in the Mtl YAML needs to refer to the actual service instance name in Cloud Foundry.
Yeah. So you might want to avoid special character there.
Yeah, definitely. And just a second. If you go up to the webhook API, where the URL is coming out, the default URL, initially I thought, like, where's this default URL coming from? But Cloud Foundry, whenever you start an application, gives you a route, or whenever, like, a particular route if you define one, or default random route if you set random route to true. And this is taken by Mtl YAML that you just can give it to other applications and as properties, which is like, there are a lot of other properties which you can take in Mtl YAML and put it into other what is it called, modules in Mtl YAML. That's something I didn't understand in the beginning as well.
It's quite a difficult file in the beginning. You're like, YAML, what? And then actually it makes sense if you have a look, like, okay, it's actually, you can refer to it in easy way to, okay, it's just actually a directory which is serving some module application or whatever, and you can actually combine them and require them in each other, but you have to put them in a good sequence, and then you actually get along. But indeed, in the beginning, I was also like, what is this? Can't you just put a URL there? But indeed, it's with this, you actually combine everything together. And as we saw, we actually enable the WebSocket, and we have our routes, and then actually everything is done. We only need to create our UI5 application itself. And
only.
Indeed. It's, click and we're ready.
All right, so we have our enterprise messaging service created either via the CF CLI or the cockpit. We have the Node.js application pulling the data from enterprise messaging and opening WebSockets, and the only missing piece is now the UI5 application, which connects to your WebSocket, right?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. All right.
So what we want to do here, if we actually want to open up our web app folder, and maybe it's a good idea. What do you think, Max? Should we show the application itself first before we show the code, or?
Well, in a nutshell, yeah.
Okay. So here I actually have an application, and I want to log in, of course. Okay. And this is what we will be building. We have our live stream chat, and we don't have data for the moment because we consumed it. I refreshed the page, and as we said before, when you consume a message from a queue, it's gone. It is not retained any longer. It's gone. You consumed it. So if you want to know more about it, then you will have to wait until your machine or system makes the same log again. So for that, this I will show short in the XML. And if we have our view folder here, we have our live stream chat.view.xml. And in here, we actually have a simple notification list with notification list items. And those are bound to a chat model. It's a simple JSON model that we created in the live stream chat controller, which I will show you afterwards. And in here, we actually use the message. We create a timestamp from when we get the message, and we put a nice avatar, because everything is better with avatars. And then we have our controller.js file, which is just linked to our view. And in here, nothing really special, but some like maybe unusual stuff, something that you don't use every day, maybe the WebSocket. And because I like to stay close to the UI5, how should I say, how UI5 API references itself, I use them. So they're out there available in the UI5 demo kit. You can find all the information about it right there. And what we're using this, and we are like integrated it in our controller. And as you can see, I was talking about the chat model. Here I create this JSON model, and I place it later on to the view with this pin set model. This model with the array, and I call it chat model, just like we saw here in the view. And what will happen when our application connects to our WebSocket? It actually says like, okay, give me the data, and I will store it here inside my JSON model to show it in the application. And as we were saying in the app router itself, we want to connect to the node.ws connection to the path. And we do this by providing the path, just like we said in our app router in the xsapp.json file. You can see it here. We want to connect to it. And with this, we actually made a connection to the right path to our app router to connect to the WebSocket that we created in the Node module. And then actually, we want to open that connection. Nothing special will happen here. We just open the connection to our own created WebSocket server in the Node module. And then actually there's only one thing to do left. We attach a message. So whenever you remember that we actually broadcast a message coming from enterprise messaging to all the connected clients in the Node module. So I can show it one last time. Here we create our WebSocket server. And then what happens? It's opened here. And this WebSocket server has clients. And what we do if we get a message from enterprise messaging, we take all our clients and we send them the message that is coming from enterprise messaging. And with this, we actually, now I have to see, we actually get the message inside here because it will put it to all the clients that are connected and they will receive it, and it's accessible via the O-control event.get parameter data. Inside here, you will have your message.
What is the attach message method name is, for me, kind of confusing because it's actually receiving the message, right?
Yeah, indeed. So that's a little bit tricky because when I was looking indeed also to the documentation, I was like, what's this? Like, why? Because I don't know if it's possible with the WebSocket connection provided by the UI5, but I think if you would use socket.io, you can also use like the emit, and with this you can actually kind of create your own functions to listen to. So for example, it should it would not be called attach message, but you could say something like so, and then you could say like on message or on whatever, then you could choose a name yourself.
Okay. Tricky question. Does that mean that I could, for example, send messages back to the Node.js application running on the backend?
Totally. Yep. Okay. So what we could do with something like that is if we want to trigger something, for example, to specific users or another system, you could create just a call from this. And that's something that would happen via connection.send, if I'm not mistaken. Then you can just send a message to your own WebSocket server inside the Node.js module, and then you could act based on that stuff, or like you want to notify other people that are connected to the WebSocket. It's just works the same way. And that's actually a cool stuff and maybe a cool continue part for creating a chat application, because then you would not need the enterprise messaging part. You just use the WebSocket itself and you can start create your chat app that sends to both applications. So let me just put this back at message was. And what happened here? We made some like small, how would I say, inventations. Like here we have M points, and then we will put the message avatar of Max, and we put the message. And here we put my picture, it starts with a D, and otherwise it's Gandalf, because Gandalf is with us. It's always, everything is better with avatars. And here we have our timestamp. This is not the timestamp coming from the message. It's just the timestamp that we generate for this demo purpose in the UI5 application.
Okay.
Then we put this message to our model in the chat array, and we refresh the model, and it should be visible in the application. So
Nice.
I think it's time to have a look at it, and there's nothing I want to hide here. There's no other magic. If you just want to see, this is a date string that is here. It's a function to get our date and time that I just placed there. And this is some stuff that you also can integrate if, for example, it's closed or you get an error on the WebSocket, then you can be notified by it too. So no other code here. It's really these few lines that will help you to create this application. So I think it's time to go into the application itself. I will refresh it one more time. I will also have a look at what happens in the code itself. Maybe I will go out of the full screen. And once you deploy the application, because that's obviously something you want to do too, you want to deploy it. And once you deployed it, it's actually available here. And of course, I have to down again. It's gonna be there. Once you deploy it, the modules are available under your applications. Just right here. Under the applications, you can see this was just the deployer for the UI5 application. And in here, we have our node module and we have our app router, which will lead to the UI5 application itself. And if we have a look at the enterprise messaging WebSocket, and we go to the logs when we have this application, to the logs of the enterprise messaging WebSocket, we see all the logs. For example, these were some tests this morning. I saw more proto. It's all there. And then here, when you refresh the application, the UI5 application, what you're actually doing is you connect to your own WebSocket server, to the client. And not to mistaken, these are all tests. Let me just search for it. It should be here somewhere too. As you can see, when you start up your Node.js application, you remember we put it outside of our WebSocket server. We actually connect to the AMQP Enterprise Messaging Service. And this is the first thing it will do. It will connect to it. And then when you actually connect your client, it will say connected to the client. So those are two different parts. First, we connect to the Enterprise Messaging service, and then we actually connect our client. We log when a client connects to our own WebSocket server. And it seems like nothing is down here, so that looks good. And then we have a look at our application itself. So one refresh of the page, because sometimes, of course, you can get timeouts, something you should take care of too. And then it's time to send actually a message. Okay, so where's my postman? It's hiding somewhere. All right, Max, you are really fast today. And then I'm searching for my postman, but I don't find it. So I will close it and I will reopen it, and we'll also try to send a message.
I've been too fast, I'm sorry.
Hey,
I was so tempted to do this.
It means that it's working, so that we're not telling lies today. This will never actually, but it's always nice when a live demo is working. So again, here we have our URL endpoint to our queue. We have a body, and I will say under my name, because we put that rocket science there with our names. Hi, Max. Thanks for inviting me today. I think that looks cool. Awesome. And
just as a disclaimer, once again, that's not how enterprise messaging is supposed to work.
And if you forget to put, indeed, so one small stuff about it, if you forget in your app router, I cannot stress it enough, this part, you will not be able to put the connection. So then you would get actually the following stuff. Let me see, where is the application going to? Right here. And then I need my stuff here. Then it will say the following: you shall not pass. If you do not put it in your app router, it's not going to happen. And actually, with this, everything together, you actually combine everything, it will be working. And maybe I can try to just point out one small thing in here. Like, let me go to the application studio. If you start here your app router and you start your node module, you want to use actually also the same path, or you create your own destinations in a default Mtl.json file. And you will say like, okay, connect to HTTP localhost port 8080, because that is actually what is exposed here by our service, but it will not be working because this port 8080 is actually, it will say a message like if you open the Node.js module, its URL, it will say upgrade required. And that's because there's a difference between those HTTP protocols and the TCP protocols. And it will not like it, it's not the correct way. So it will complain about it. But still, if you want to connect your application in Business Application Studio, you just skip the app router part because there are some small difficulties with it. And what you can do here, you can say WSS dot slash, and then you can put the full URL of your application. And if you don't know the application URL, just use the comment palette in here. And there you
Start
just
the application
or
and expose the pod, right?
if you indeed, no, it's not running, but there you will see the full URL of your application. For example, if it's, you ran it first, it will be like Ep11 somewhere in the URL, and then you put this full URL after it. Of course, remove the HTTPS, the whole points. And then you are also able to connect. But still, again, sometimes it can be that your WebSocket will go down. But still, it's possible to implement it in Application Studio. And with this, you create your full application actually with enterprise messaging. But do not create guys, use it for S4 event or IoT event or other cool event, but no.
Yeah. Just awesome demo. Pretty well done. Nice to see some code finally. I think what we need to talk in the last minutes is about the difference between WebSockets and enterprise messaging, because both are kind of like different communication channels than like HTTP requests. But still, there's like a tremendous difference between WebSockets and enterprise messaging.
Indeed. So the thing about a WebSocket, you can, in some kind of way, it doesn't have anything to do with enterprise messaging. It's a standalone. You can create an application with a WebSocket. I would say, why would you use the WebSocket? Because you want to be notified in real time, and you don't want to have your application pulling or polling for new data, because it will use a lot of internet connection. It's the bandwidth. And actually, your browser, after a while, if you create something like, for example, as set interval to request data every 5 seconds to make it work and get that real-time data, because that's actually, in my eyes, no real-time data. I hate it. Your browser will overheat, your computer will get hot, and everything will like burn down, and nothing will work in the end anymore. Your application will crash, it get lost out of memory. If it's too fast, your request will not be able to follow. And with that, that's something and a place or a moment in time where you want to start using WebSockets. Because with WebSockets, it's actually notifying the client. Instead, the client is going to ask, hey, is there new data? We can actually compare it to going to a library. For example, if you want a new book, you're not going to go every hour or every day to request if the new book is there again. No, you will wait until the library contacts you and say, oh, the book is here. So that's when you want to.
I think with regard to push notification on your iPhone or whatever, I think enterprise messaging and WebSockets are kind of similar. But when it comes to resilience, I think enterprise messaging is like fire and forget. I don't really care if anybody is connected, but a WebSocket really needs the clients. Otherwise, you can't really send the messages.
Indeed. So with that, the enterprise messaging itself also uses the WebSockets because you can connect to it. That's why our Node.js application is also not pulling for events. It's not pulling, for example, an API of enterprise messaging, because that would also create overheat, and then we just replace the problem from our UI to the Node module. And it's really the WebSocket of enterprise messaging itself in Cloud Platform that notifies our Node.js application, which then notifies our UI. And this is actually a kind of proper and clear way to implement such a scenario, I think.
Yeah, it changes the architecture of applications entirely from my point of view.
Yeah.
And I mean, I worked outside the SAP world in the banking industry when I started as a Java developer. That was super common whenever transactions are coming in. That's like all done via messaging buses.
Yeah.
And I think that's super underrated or underestimated what enterprise messaging and WebSockets
Indeed.
are able to do. So, Dries, thanks a lot. Awesome demo.
Welcome.
Probably one or two last questions before I do some advertising for the other live streams. I think the most important question is whenever you start something new, like with the enterprise messaging, 2 or 3 things which you found challenging in the beginning and where you have like a hack or a tip or a trick for whoever is going to start with enterprise messaging.
So, for example, if you would start with enterprise messaging, the first thing you want to do is you want to have a look at the concepts and at the SAP help documentation, because if you're just going to start right away, because it's, I think, a bad habit for developers. We all have them. We just want to.
We want to see something live.
Yeah, indeed. You don't want to, like, you just want to see the end result immediately, but it's going to take you way longer if you don't have a small or like close look to the concepts about it. Also, if you don't like the reading part or you think it's still not very clear to you, I really would recommend the developers of SAP tutorials and the HANA Academy videos, because combining those two and actually some blog posts about other people, it's really handy to get started with it. It will like give you that click. You will like be turned on with some information, and you will say like, oh yeah, it's like that. Because otherwise you will be searching for hours, and you will lose time, and you will get frustrated, and then you will just leave it. Then second of all, it's also not important. It's choosing your editor, your code editor, because Application Studio, I really like it to work with it, but sometimes it can be difficult, especially when it comes to authentication and to WebSockets. So if you want to avoid that, I actually would recommend to use Visual Code or even the Web IDE. When you start a project in the Web IDE, you can also just run it, and then you can actually use the app router with the path. So less difficulties there, but I would advise to just go to Visual Code, because then you're closer to the Application Studio, and which is, I think, the new way to go a little more. So try to do that. And then third of all, if you're just playing around with enterprise messaging, you can do whatever you want, but really try to feel and think about, should I use enterprise messaging for this? If it's something that you should use or not, that's really something you have to take care of. And actually, there's no guideline for what or whenever to use it, but you will know when you're abusing it. You will know it by yourself. And this way, I think with those 3 points, you don't have to forget to have a lot of fun with it, because if you can create these applications and you can deploy them, it's really nice. And a good thing is to start with it and to really understand how the WebSockets and enterprise messaging work. Put a lot of breakpoints and have a look at, okay, what's happening in this part, what's happening here, when do I get there, and what's the point about this module. It really helps you to understand it, and it will help you to make such applications way faster.
Cool. One last thing I want to add. I think the webhooks and the REST APIs are really helpful in the beginning. If you don't want to write a full application or something, just playing around how queues works, the REST API. And I think from my point of view, I've just read it in the What's New documentation that they've implemented in the cockpit some functionality to consume and publish messages without having to write anything else.
Really cool.
It's just in the cockpit. Alrighty.
Really handy.
Dries, thanks a lot once again. Awesome blog post. Keep going. Hope to see you soon on the stream again. And just to round it up.
Also, thanks again for having me.
You're welcome. There are some other live stream this week. I always feel bad for advertising in the end, but live streaming is somehow different. There's a ABAP Freak Show this afternoon. It's the 26th of May with Thomas Young and Rich Hyman about what's new in ABAP 2005, the ABAP Cloud. There's another one by me on Thursday about the SAP Cloud SDK for Java, and DJ we'll end the week on Friday with some custom task UI for the SAP Cloud Platform workflow service.
Awesome.
With that, I want to thank you, Dries, once again. Let me just bring on the big screen once again. And I want to wish everybody on the stream or on the replay good week. See you soon. Stay healthy and take care. Bye, Dries.
Thanks. Bye, Max.